Hello, my name is Jacqueline Sundberg. I am Outreach Librarian for the ROAAR Collections here at McGill. Thanks for joining us today. We're excited to hear from photographer and graphic designer Angela Grauerholz for an artist talk about the ways that her practice has changed and evolved. This event is recorded at McGill University, which is located on land that has long served as a place of meeting and exchange amongst Indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations. ROAAR honors, recognizes, and respects these nations as the traditional stewards of the lands and waters on which we meet today. I look forward to the exchange of ideas that we hear and the continuation of that long tradition of meeting and exchange established by the original stewards of these territories. Now, I'm going to cede the podium to our new Dean of Libraries, Guylaine Beaudry, who will welcome today's guest and kick us off to open the program. After that, MacLeod will take over and introduce Angela.
Throughout our campus, engagement with works of art is both by chance and by design. The art on campus is for everyone to enjoy, especially when the artist is on site. Angela, welcome to this space, our space. We're very happy to have you and listen to you talking to us about your art. I am so very excited to learn about about your process and practice when creating photographic works. I'll be able to stay with you half an hour, and I made space in my agenda for that. I want to take one last moment to thank the event organizers, Michelle, MacLeod, Jacqueline Sandberg, and the entire team of the Visual Arts Collection and ROAAR. We have a ROAAR theme. I love that name. And it stands for the Rare and Special Collections, Osler Library of the History of Medicine, Visual Arts Collection, and the McGill University Archives. So thank you. You're doing a fantastic job. Outreach initiatives like this one are very important and would not be possible without all your efforts. Thank you. I now invite the curator, Michelle MacLeod, to the podium to introduce our special guest and give us some background information on the VAC collection. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Guylaine. The impetus for this talk this evening was a very generous donation of a photograph by Angela Grauerholz from Morton Spector. This photograph is titled Hospital, and it's now proudly displayed in the entrance of the Art History and Communications Department in the Arts Building. Hospital is a large-scale photograph that draws you in. I'll also draw your attention to the dimensions on screen to think about how large this photograph is. It's equally familiar as it is disorientating, and it makes the viewer stop and think, where have I seen this building before? Every aspect of this photograph's form, its process, its color, its size, are intentionally designed by the artist to elicit this reaction to its subject. Hospital belongs to a series that Angela created in the late 1980s, and that's about memory, or rather the truthfulness of our memories and the role of photography in constructing it. When Morton Spector first approached the VAC, Visual Arts Collection, with this special donation, I was absolutely delighted at the prospect of caring for this photograph in the collection and sharing it with our community. I was especially pleased to have the opportunity to install it in the Art History and Communications Department because it's the type of image, it's the type of photograph that deserves to be interrogated, thought of as a conceptual image. And I'm excited that there's emerging and established scholars using this space and encountering this artwork in their daily time at McGill. The Visual Arts Collection holds over 400 photographs in our collection. And I think that Angela Grauerholz's photograph is a perfect addition to the collection because it makes us think inherently about the medium of photography and its place and function within a fine arts collection. A researcher wanting to know a little bit more about Angela's work can consult her artist book, Privation, which was published in 2002. And one of the 15 editions of this work are available in McGill's rare books and special collections. This is a book about books that were unfortunately destroyed by fire. Angela has carefully documented the front and back of each book And I can attest to consulting this book in the Rare Books reading room in a building filled with books. It's quite a moving and quite an emotional experience to consult this piece of artwork. Not only is Angela Grauerholz an award-winning artist, she is a creative graphic designer, an archive co-founder, and an educator. So I was very pleased that she accepted our invitation to talk to us today, because these two examples of her work, a photographic print and an artist book, I think are just the beginning of what we can learn from her. Angela was born in Germany, and she's been based here in Montreal since the 1970s. Before she came to Canada, she completed 2 degrees in Hamburg, one in graphic design and another in literature and linguistics. She then moved to Montreal to complete an MFA in photography from Concordia University. In 1980, she was a co-founder of Artext, which is a really vital archive to study the Canadian art in Montreal. And I'm studying 19th century material, so I always say 1890. In the 1980s, in 88, she became a professor at the École de Design at UQAM. And from 2008 to 2012, she's been the director of the Centre de Design there. And in 2019, Emily Carr University awarded her an honorary doctorate. As a graphic designer, she's worked with many distinguished artists and art institutions specializing in catalogs and artist books. As an artist, she's won prestigious art awards such as the Émile Bourdois Award in 2006 and the Scotiabank Photography Award in 2015. Her work is exhibited and collected by renowned national and international institutions, including the MAC here in Montreal and the National Gallery of Canada in Ottawa. And she currently has a show on at Occurrence Gallery that's on view until December 17th. In preparation for this evening's talk, head of Rare Books, Jennifer Garland, and I invited Angela to come tour the library space. So we looked at art installations here. We went into the Rare Book stacks and into the archives. And it was a real treat to see these spaces through Angela's eyes. Not only did we stop to admire contemporary art, medieval manuscripts, children's books, artist books, a beautiful printing press, we also stopped to appreciate archival ribbons, a font serif, book cards, stamp holders, and even reflections in the reading room windows. This should give you a sense of what you can hear about this evening. Angela likes to think about the devices of knowledge, the objects that we use to create, hold, organize, and display information. These devices certainly include the camera, the photograph, the book, but her creative approach brings new perspectives to the materiality and the practicality of these forms. Here in the library, another holder and organizer of information, Angela Grauerholz's work can help us possibly reframe, rethink the extraordinary collections and the surroundings on offer here. So Angela, welcome to McGill. We're so pleased to have you. I'll pass it over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for these wonderful introductions. Thank you to Michelle. Thank you to Jennifer and Guylaine and Jacqueline. And I am very touched by this introduction. In fact, I'm not sure I have anything to add to it. It's yeah, you pretty much touched on everything I will. And yeah, wonderful. Thank you. So I can leave some stuff out, maybe. We'll see how it goes. I usually write out my lectures and then leave it to the side. However, I will read something in the end to you. I brought some books and I brought some brochures that I now tend to make following an artwork. I realized that I enjoyed writing about it and just putting my thoughts together. And so it's just something that I'm doing now. And I'm quite amazed, actually, that you had even a photo of the show that's on at Occurrence. I will maybe talk about a little bit about that later. I thought I'd start with the photo that I got in the mail. And We can't take this off down there, huh? Me too. Well, okay. They can't?
No.
Lucky them. Okay, so this photograph, and I will have to read something about that. As Michel said, is part of a larger series of cyberchromes, and I thought I start. And as she said, it's quite important to consider this change from the very material aspect of photography in the 80s and what it is, or what it tends to be now. So I thought it was quite interesting when this work was required and Michelle contacted me that she thought, she thought that the black frame was actually quite imposing. So I want to talk a little bit about that, but first, cyberchromes. What are cyberchromes? So I don't know if you know, but this process is not being produced anymore. It was invented by Ciba-Geigy and eventually was taken over by Ilford, but Ilford had to also retire it. And it was supposed to be much more permanent, and it was made from slides, literally from reversal, from a positive image. Having worked always with negatives, this was like a new kind of idea for me, and I came across it. There was nothing special that made me start thinking about it, and I started playing around with it. I think, well, I'll tell you just about the process a little bit. It's a high quality color print made from color transparency, enlarged directly onto reversible color paper. The paper is unique in that dyes are incorporated into the emulsion on the paper instead of being formed chemically. This gives exceptional color image brilliance and is more permanent. The materiality of this particular paper is almost, you can almost sense it. Unfortunately, when it's exposed like this with the plexiglass on top of it, you can't really get at it in the same way. The reversal made me realize that it actually expressed quite interestingly the way I started out. It kind of literally made it happen. I started out wanting to slow down photography because for me in the 70s, the idea of the decisive moment really became quite against what I felt photography should be about. And I don't necessarily think that anymore, but I'm telling you that's how I went about it. And so I worked with a very small camera and continue to do so. Today, my cameras are not bigger than this, and I snap shoot, and then I don't necessarily work the photograph very much. I never really crop or anything like that. I do tend to maybe work it in a way that I pay particular attention that it has an ambiguity as to what and how I framed it, and that it is actually seems much more studied than it actually was. So there is that kind of pull between two things that I maintain throughout my practice. I call it sometimes an in-between space. I call it sometimes at the same timeness. I call it all kinds of things, but it is something that really I seem to search out in the creation of images, but also in the production of installations, which is something that I did beginning with the mid-90s. And in fact, I feel now that my practice is divided into two. The installation work and the photographic work. I do continue photographing much more rarely than I used to. I work much more on these so-called archive pieces, because I create archives for them. When I have an idea for something that I would like to work on and I would like to learn, I create an archive. I start collecting anything that comes in the email, anything that I see on the outside world, in magazines, etc., etc. I just start collecting. More on that later. So back to the Cyberchrome, the idea of elongating a moment rather than making it this whipped moment of the camera makes me feel like I want to almost make a film. And so eventually, actually, I did get into a little bit of filmmaking. But the reversal here alludes to that idea. The reversal, instead of having white mats, which were the going thing at the time for framing photographs, I have a black mat, which is like the room in a film theater or something. It dives it or embeds it. Oops, it doesn't want to move anymore. Wait.
Hey, successful.
Do I have to click on the pad?
No, it should work now.
Okay. So here is a version where you don't have the black around it, which is how Michelle encountered it on my website. And the reason why I put it on the website like this, because it has more of a scale. It doesn't on a screen. And actually, in working with students on their photography, I realized that they never really print. They experience work on a screen. They experience work by scrolling through things. They experience all kinds of stuff, but they don't actually experience the materiality of a photograph. So here we have that difference also. What I thought I'd do is I run through some photographs without showing them too much, because I realize I don't have that much time today, and it is a 40-year practice, so I had to choose a little bit in what I want to hang on to and what I don't want to hang on to. So what I thought I'd do is, and I'm quite logical in these kinds of things, is talk to you a little bit about what I'm drawn to. And in fact, I actually have to always a little bit smile about my way of photographing, because I can't help myself but repeat myself. I just cannot help myself taking certain photographs, and I show you which ones they are. But in the end, it doesn't make any difference to me anymore. Here we have, I'm just going to show them and just enjoy for what they are and what they. There's no reason to really hang on to, other than this one. One of the fascination, obviously, is libraries and archives. And one of the reasons why I'm so attracted to it is, among other things, like the building, the hospital that Michelle was talking about, you have a kind of closed offness that you have no access to it. And this kind of access, or denial of access, is very intriguing. It immediately makes you want to question something. So if a photograph doesn't make you question what you're looking at, why are you looking at it? So I'm really very fond of something that is intriguing because it's closed off to us. We don't know what's inside. And so that is very true for books, very true for libraries, because we have a cover, and not every cover gives away what's inside. Accumulation is another thing that I'm drawn to. Accumulation of obviously I'm a collector, and it's a terrible, terrible affliction. I'm drawn to light. I'm drawn to, obviously, as a photographer, you always look at light, but I'm drawn to especially windows, and windows that obliviate certain aspects of the rooms that, and mostly work with rooms. So it's light that is natural, but it's also light that is artificial. And the one before, obviously, and it's not just light and artificiality, it's museum displays. I can't help but photograph a whole lot of museum displays. And obviously that's what I do when I visit another city. I go to museums, and here we have the Met, for example. This seems like real light, but it's actually artificial. So museum displays and other kinds of lights that still hide whatever is going to happen, or it's kind of ghostly and we don't know where it comes from. Or the other thing, and that's like a real obsession, sitting arrangements. This is a museum display, and what you see in the front on the chair is actually a mirror. This was Voltaire's room at Sans Souci. Curtains, another one that I cannot help but look at. Patterns, curtains and patterns. Sometimes the sitting arrangement or the patterns are smelly. And they're always empty. So this kind of animated, inanimated object is probably something that fascinates me, because it's an invitation, but at the same time, who's going to sit down on this thing? This was a lucky strike at a museum when they had just removed everything that was being viewed. And more seatings. And here we have a little bit of an idea of how these things would be arranged in a gallery setting. I was very lucky to work with Catherine Bédard at the Centre Culturel Canadien in Paris, and she really enjoyed bringing out these kinds of juxtapositions that happen not in a linear way, but in a spatial way. And I myself really enjoy that spatialization of images and text, as you will see. My first archival work, or when I was starting to be interested in what was I going to do with all these images, these negatives, and how will I cope with this stuff? Am I going to throw it out, or am I going to keep it somewhere? But why? So these questions really became quite at times anxiety-ridden, but on the other hand, I felt that I needed to really deal with it. And so this was the first one. It was the result of the second of two other pieces. So there was a trilogy, and I'm just going to have to catch up here. A trilogy, and you can't read it all. It's called Egglog, or Filling the Landscape, a trilogy about landscape photography, or my landscape photography. So partly I would shoot photographs once I had embarked on this work, and partly I had them. So I would cull from my negatives, and I would really work very hard to complete it. So that's why I called it Filling the Landscape, which really meant filling this particular piece of furniture. Which again works with the same kind of strategies that I've mentioned before. It's transparent. It invites the viewer. The viewer actually can see what's inside the box by reading the title. It's not just one title necessarily. It was actually almost like little poems. It would be a categorization of landscape. So you would have park, grounds, and it would go on like this, usually about 6 to 7 words. There are all in all about 250 photographs here, which came originally from another piece that I did in Brittany, in France. And these are just some examples from one of the portfolios, which was called Entering and Leaving the Landscape. So I had a lot of trouble with this piece because it was my first one and people didn't expect it. But at the same time, the museum only granted so many hours per day to view the portfolios. And it had to be done by a museum personnel, and people didn't like that. But I was surprised because I thought it was a very nice object, and why is that not enough? When you see the photograph of it, or if you see this, you don't necessarily have to go into it and see it all. You just appreciate also the richness of the collection. Voila, I learned from that. This is just a catch up on the Brittany piece, which was exposed in the reception room, but also in the library. This was a book in the 3rd version of the landscape trilogy, Aporia, which also indicated for me a moment in time where I felt quite up against a wall. I wasn't quite sure what to do with this idea of photographic archives, which I called, and I learned that by doing the piece in Brittany, a fond photographique, which I find is much more appropriate as an expression than a series. So the difference would be that there's actually, it's an indication of an archive, but it is not exactly an archive. This is the first version of it, 80 photographs in the library of a castle in Brittany. It was a permanent installation for a while. It unfortunately got dismantled. Like so many other works actually that I have lost. And nobody knows where it is. It's kind of interesting. I wonder who had the nerve to put it in the garbage. Anyways, I learned from all of this, especially from the plexiglass piece, that one needs to maybe make things more accessible to the public. So I went the other way and made something very accessible. These were the sketches for it. Let me show you the piece first. It's built like a tombstone or a mausoleum, and these were some of the ideas that I incorporated. It's also like a museum display of drawers that you pull out. It was inspired by a lecture that I followed by Susan Buck Morris about the passages in Paris that Walter Benjamin wrote about extensively, and actually started a kind of archive in the National Library in Paris. It was called convolutes, which were note quotes that he collected and notes that he collected. He never really made the book, but the book was made, I don't know, about 20 years ago, I guess. So this was called Sentencia, and 1 to 62. And if you see closely on one side, on the right-hand side, you see a window. On the left-hand side, you see some other scene, some potential scene. And here I started really developing this idea of the potentiality of how you could interpret something that through its framework or literally frame, through its context, and through the way it was juxtaposed. Now here you can actually go, the frames are both sides, and I often refer to this as a monument or a monument to books. So yes, they are frames, but for me, they also function like a book page. However, you have to be very active to look at it like a book. So it becomes very performative for the viewer. You have to make choices. And that was very, very, very interesting for me to learn about this. There was not a museum piece that was guided by museum personnel, but here was the first time that I actually gave permission to the viewer to interact with the work. Here's just some examples of the pieces. So this is recto verso of one of the frames. By the way, you can interrupt me anytime if you have a specific question, because I'm rushing through this to get to more recent work. So the next one, I guess, is Privation, or I misplaced it. Yes, this is a misplaced slide. Privation, as Michel said, is the result of a fire that my husband and I had in our home, a renovation, quite typical, very random, absolutely very uninteresting, but I hung on to the books, or rather the insurance company hung on to the books, and I got them delivered, and I realized that most of them were completely calcified and couldn't be opened anymore. So like anything that you look at and you cannot access, these books were inaccessible. However, they had a certain very beautiful, had a certain beauty. They became almost, well, they became another kind of object. So this is something that I would display them like this if I didn't want people to manipulate it, or as the misplaced slide showed, you can also, I sometimes also give it to a gallery and they can open it and work with it. Now, the idea here was, and I think you mentioned that the piece of paper, each feuille, each page, recto verso, is a book. So because you can't open it, I reproduced in a way and reconstituted my library by, this is not recto verso, but this one is. You constituted my library in a book of about 350 pages, which of course is not all the books that burned. But my original principle of it was that I wanted to just see what was left over, and often it was just the covers from hardcover books melted away, and so it was only exposed either white here, or the first title page, or the pages, the covers in the black book, And it reduced to something like, I don't know, 5, 6 colors: gray, blue, red, and green, and black and white, obviously. I added eventually also these books that had illustrations on them because they were quite funky at times. And I even made one big wall with title pages where you had either nothing on it, just a burn part, or you had like a title, but not the whole title. You didn't have the author or the year or publisher. You just had the title. So this is how I would expose them, usually going around the room and encircling the viewer. Now, this is a fond photographique, as I mentioned before. It's the same subject matter. It's not like the snapshots that change subject matter, even though I repeat myself. In this case, it's a true repetition of the same subject. And I created 2 other series, which I will briefly show some examples. And they are quite recent, 2018. Because I was invited just before, or 2 years before that, to the Musée Carnavalet to photograph the museum that's being emptied out. Now, there's a whole anecdote to it, and I wish I could tell you, but I won't. It was enormously fascinating because this was one of my favorite museums in Paris. I don't know if you are familiar with it. It's a museum of the history of Paris. And you go through rooms of historical events or buildings, et cetera, et cetera. It's attached to the original villa of Madame de Sévigné, who is very well, or was, and still is actually, revered and well known for her letter writing. And in fact, at the time, she had a salon with many other women around her that was famous for inviting mostly male thinkers to their salon to exchange. And so it was the art of conversation, the art of letter writing, and it has influenced the French language greatly. And it is known as such. Now, so I am in this museum, and you see what's left of it. Basically, just patterns. As you know, as I told you, I love patterns. So, then there are some very special moments. I always think of this as a Magritte picture. And then there are special rooms because of their light. And other special rooms because they literally say what I often think about of accessibility, inaccessibility. Then there are the striped rooms. They're my favorite. They were my favorite, I have to say. And other, elevator rooms that had tapestry on their doors to make it coherent. It's a huge series, and I just gave you a taste of it. So that's one fond photographique, and the other fond photographique is the empty shelf, which is still ongoing, and which gave rise to another piece that I'm working on. But you'll see. And so here are some empty shelves. Part of them were the first. Let me wait. A lot of them were photographed in the now empty Royal Vic. And that was another really, and strangely enough, it was all the same year I was invited to all these empty places to photograph. And this is another one from the Carnavalet. This is the Vic. But the first one I ever took is years and years ago. Yeah, that was disgusting. Yeah. Yeah, actually, that place is not very pleasant. But this was an old library, and I had the good fortune to work in a lot of libraries, old ones and some new ones, and so but I got stuck on the empty shelf, and it was this library that invited me for a week-long, or not even 2-week-long artist residency, where I interviewed some interns, and I started photographing. But it actually, the result of it all was not that interesting to me, and because it was really just one photograph. And that's an interesting thing, that if you go into a space, that you try to find the photograph to take of the space, and it's not that easy. I think Lynn Cohen speaks about that a lot or spoke about it when she worked in a space. For me, it was more like I wanted to feel the space, and I wanted to understand about why this space even existed. It was closed to the public. It now has reopened. Most of the books, as you can see, it's quite full, quite filled, but most of the books were completely, they were undoing themselves. They were, you couldn't open them. So here again, my obsession with not being able to open something. And then, but the most that became interesting to me was really in this empty shelf, where you just have a dark space that echoes something, but not quite sure what. That's it for that library. This is a more recent library that I visited in Chennai, the former Madras. It is the Madras Literary Society. This library exists, I forget how long, a long time. It's very dusty, very dirty, but it has a lot of people that are volunteering to clean it up and to bring it back to its former glory. It was established by some English people that also left their books there. And you can see the upper part, you don't see that many labels, but the lower part, they have been identified and labeled. I was lucky enough to get one wing emptied out, apart from these very, very large shelves, and it was proposed to me that because I couldn't put up any pictures on the wall or on the shelves, that I come up with something else. So I made 2 books. One was The Empty Shelf. It was a large book, and I started to work on a brochure, which was inspired from another brochure before, quoting from a text by Maurice Blanchot, which is called The Book to Come. And it basically talks about Mallarmé's book, Le Livre, that never really existed, but he wrote for 10 years. He wrote about it, he thought about it, he imagined it, he described it, he did everything. Most of the content was even produced. However, he never really, it never came to pass. And partly, I think it is because it was too ambitious a project. And I think that's something that is the danger of working with a lot of material. And I often feel in that very same situation where I don't know if I can think my way through something. And but it helps to break things down. So this was one of the states that I went, or states that I went through to not only talk about the empty shelves, but talk about the object of the book. And it was kind of interesting to have these tent cards. And I invented these ideas of what a book could be. So the whole idea about books continues to be predominant in the archive work that I do. Now, this is the Vancouver Public Gallery, where I worked and installed a piece that is called the Reading Room for the Working Artist. And I will dwell a little longer on the reading room. I'm just putting it in this context because it's another library. It was shown before in the States in Houston at the Blaffer Gallery, but the full and complete work was shown here in Montreal at Vox. This is an installation photo, and I'll go through it a little bit and talk about it while I'm going through it. But these are the main elements. You have 2 tables with each 6 chairs, and you have a chess game in the back, and you have a framed photograph, or rather magazine. The magazine is indicative, and I this is one of the strategies that I use a lot now, that I give a clue to see how you can possibly read the work. I'll get back to that. So this is how can I say, it's a facsimile, but not really, because it's an interpretation of this particular photograph. The 2 photographs Rodchenko took of his Club Ouvrier, which was done for l'Exposition Internationale à Paris. And it was created to demonstrate the cultural impact of workers being allowed to read and take photographs and have leisure time and stuff like that, which was, of course, just ideologically driven completely and not necessarily true, but it made a good exhibition. And you see in the back, typography is the word Lenin, and there's a portrait of Lenin, and there's all kinds of other things. But I concentrated mostly on the tables and the chairs and the chess game. I had this material. Eventually, I had more material, but here's the other view from the other side on the left. And you have a model from the top with another image of Lenin. You have Rodchenko himself playing chess with somebody. And while he dedicated it to Lenin, I dedicated it to Duchamp and Man Ray, for obvious reasons. I don't think I have to get into that too deeply. I made an archive. That was the first archive I physically created, but I also created digitally. So this work, and it's something I forgot to mention about the Privation series. The Privation series came out of a real stress in my photographic life. Photography for me, black and white photography was finished for me. I couldn't sustain it. It was impossible. And so I had to find another way to ease my way into technology, but also to work with color. Yes?
Why?
Why? Why what?
Black and white film. Why did you come to it?
It was too expensive. It was absolutely, I mean, you can still now get some film and you can still do it, but it basically ate up what I could sell it for. And if I made 10 photographs and sold one, I was really in dire straits. So, and it just wasn't sustainable. as simple as that. But I can now, with digital means, I can do black and white photography. It's not the same though. Yeah, keep going.
Just right at the very beginning of your talk, you said, I use small cameras. But all of your work that I've seen looks to me like it was done with large format, 8x10.
Yes.
And so it's interesting. I mean, how come you said at the beginning you were just using like
Well, it's
35mm?
Yeah, always 35mm. I don't even know how to operate a big camera. In fact, I'm not a very good technical person.
I mean, you did large format, 8x10.
Why?
No, but you did do large format.
Never.
You mean those pictures that
They're
I've been
all-
looking at for years? That one with the staircase with the lights, it's amazing.
Yes.
That's done with what?
35mm, little Leica.
Well, I'll just repeat the question. It was what format of camera you used over the years to produce these enormous scale photographs? And your answer, there you go. I'll just raise the question of time and that we're almost at 5 p.m. And if we want to open it up to more questions, I know we could keep you for an hour and a half. We'll have you back maybe to talk about more recent stuff. But I'm just raising the question flag for time. And if you do have questions on the Zoom, you can pop them in the chat and we'll try and get to them. If people do want to stay a little bit over time, you're welcome to. And if you have to leave promptement at 5, we understand.
We'll pick that up later. Okay, so down below you see the key that I meant to give you in the piece. You see on the left-hand side is Vertov's photo eye poster, and on the right-hand side you have the cover of Interview magazine, which was created by Andy Warhol as a kind of gossipy magazine in the art world, and they used at one point or appropriated that poster to have a nice cover, I guess. I don't know what I can't remember what the content is. Anyways, it's now hidden in the frame and hidden away in a museum. I made 12 books. You can see that you can switch around, you can perform with this kind of piece, and that was the intention, to create another kind of activating the public piece, and even you can play chess. And this particular little chess game, it's not any bigger than this, made out of cardboard, kind of confirmed to me that I was on the right track when I was playing around with these ideas of making an archive and including, rather than just photographs, also all kinds of things like postcards, anything that I collected, bits and pieces of text. And in part, I think I did that because I needed to get rid of it. I needed to put order to it, create something with it, and then get rid of it. It's actually a very Benjaminian concept, this idea of citation, to expel from your memory or your experience something.
How did you handle, it seems a lot of your works have concrete pieces of furniture as a part of these installations as well. How do you expel that from your collected habit?
You hope for somebody to buy it, or you give it away. Both of the all 3 pieces are in museum collections. Yeah. And the reading room I gave to the National Gallery after they bought the Sentencia piece. I felt that was a very good place to have it. It's very hard to get out, though, I have to say. So here, just an example of these book pages, and this particular book is from the book. Oh, I meant to get the title out. I forgot. It's something flirting with death, something like that, because that first blue picture is by an artist who called the picture Flirting with Death, something like that. And so you run through all kinds of pictures that I have collected that are about dead things or death, or the last 4 pictures, for example, are about what my title was, Life is Dangerous. So I actually had a lot of fun with this, and also ended up making a film together with a colleague designer. And it's a collage of films and images from the books, and the films are an extra archive that I created at the time. Another thing that became very dominant in my thinking about this, because I was citing or imitating something, was this whole idea of the copy and the facsimile, and what is the difference between interpreting something and bringing it to the fore in a different way, and recontextualizing it, and at the same time, it is something that has existed in another form before. So this table that you see there are my collection of facsimiles of modernist books, and I find different ways of integrating it when the reading room is being shown. I continue this collection, and it's still in my possession, but I will eventually obviously give it away. Here we have a stack of the books and some of the titles that are the first book that I ever made of the 12 was La Flâneuse, because it was purely a photographic book on traveling. Moving right along and quickly. I have a show right now, as Michel already said, at the gallery Occurrence, which is on the Gaspé, in the building where a number of galleries, artist-run galleries, are. It's a small room that has received, and the photograph is brilliant. Can I have it? Again, I integrated a particular quote that sends us into how to interpret it. I started out making a word cloud, and in this word cloud, I felt that I needed to have as a text something that was spoken. Don't ask me why now. It's but so I chose a short story by Kafka, in which an ape makes a presentation to the academy. It's called A Report to an Academy, and it is about him surviving because he adapted to become human-like, adapting speech, etc., etc. I invite you to go and see the show. The text that really made me feel this is an interesting direction to go is, early on I learned to disguise myself in words which really were clouds, the reference to my word clouds. The gift of perceiving similarities is in fact nothing but a weak remnant of the old compulsion to become similar and to behave mimetically. In me, this compulsion acted through words, not those that made me similar to well-behaved children, but those that made me similar to dwelling places, furniture, clothes. I was disfigured by similarity to all that surrounded me. Some images of the present piece. Strategically, I use text and image and film. And what you saw was really the the second iteration of the empty shelf, and I will run through some images of the first empty shelf, which is a series of installations that I have planned out, but I'm breaking it down into several more manageable pieces so that I can knit it together eventually in a book, or hopefully also in an exhibition that can an exhibition space that can receive several of these installations. This was shown at Artex in 2019, and was inspired by a quote by Borges. And I have to read you this quote because I cannot remember it. And am I going on, or should I just stop?
I would say we would end it there, and then we have the materials up, and if people want to ask Angela questions, you can make little material.
So let me just show these a couple of pictures. I will not go into Borges. However, just to say that Borges mentions in his story, the Library of Babel, a continuous spine, and I was just like so intrigued by this idea that it became quite natural for me to think of a spatialized book. So the room at Artex, the exhibition room that you see into, is the book. On the outside, you have a photograph of the empty shelf at the Royal Vic and a video. I made a brochure. I deliberately set off the empty shelf with the Artex archive. And I played around with underlining certain bits and pieces of text that I pulled out of the text that are on the bottom. Now, my fascination with footnotes in this case is that it replaces the text. It comes from a brochure that I brought along where I replaced the text with photographs and wrote footnotes to the photographs, talking about photographs. In this case, I'm talking about the book. I'm talking about writing, reading, and the change that technological advancement has done to our way of perceiving and reading, and all these activities of accumulating and gaining knowledge through reading. The interesting part about it is that you can read either texts, be it the floating text, be it the quotes. You can read them almost like a continuous text. So I chose the texts to be able to construct another text. However, as you can see, the rectangle there that is built by the red lines. Oops, there's an indication that there's an absence of text. Photographs. That's it. There's always a return to Blanchot and Mallarmé, etc., etc., etc. And I meant to send you, read you something, but you can read it yourself in the brochure. And now I'm just waiting and counting everybody. This is.
Yes. So thank you very much. I think we were very intrigued by the thought processes that went before and beyond the photographs themselves. I think it was a wonderful opportunity to see how the intellect and the artistic come together in a way that speaks to the images in a depth that we wouldn't get otherwise. I did want to mention one thing, though. When you talked about closed spaces, you mentioned libraries. And I want everyone here to know that, yes, that's traditionally been true, particularly of rare book libraries and special collections. It's not true anymore. So here's the thing. Anyone who's got an interest in anything related to our collections is more than welcome to come and explore them. So you heard about the VAC's collection, but I'm happy to say, particularly those of you who like cadavers and photos of cadavers and death, the Osler Library of the History of Medicine has spectacular medical collections of photographs going to the earliest days of photography. It's even earlier, and including the best collection of stereoscopic medical photographs of anatomy, pathology, brains, beautiful brains in stereoscopic images, which are three-dimensional images. So everything just leaps right out at you. So wonderful stuff there. Rare books and special collections, and the Canadian Architectural Collection has diverse collections of photographic books, but then of collections of photographic albums, of streetscapes, particularly of Montreal, and of buildings in the Canadian Architectural Collection. There's rich, I'm touching the tip of the iceberg in describing what we have here. So I'm excited to say that this is all accessible to everyone. And it's great because it's for intellectual understanding, for just the aesthetic joy of looking at them, or for inspirations for your own works. So we invite everyone to come and visit us. We have 2 upcoming events as well, and both of them in a way relate to the idea of creativity. On December 6th, we have Warp and Weft with Weaving by the Numbers. So a discussion of weaving. Jacqueline is co-hosting that with April Colosimo, one of the other librarians. And that's a growing collection we have of things related to domestic arts, weaving, knitting, which is an adjunct to our very large cookbook collection. So I think many people will find that interesting. And on December 13th at noon, we have Fabricating Reams, by the way, great titles like Fabricating Dreams. Is that yours? I loved it. It was good. With Papeterie Saint-Amand, the founders will come to talk about their experience in setting up a hand paper production unit in Point St. Charles, which they have in Papeterie Saint-Amand, you might know, it makes beautiful paper as well. So they'll talk about that. And that's an adjunct to our Colgate collection, which you're seeing some of here, which is our collection of books, and material based on the history of printing and allied things like paper making as well. And of course, we have a book arts lab where you might have seen the printing press on your way up the stairs when you come to the 4th floor. So a lot of hands-on experience for those who are interested, and I believe they'll be invited to hands-on look at some material with you after, but we did want to tie up this portion of it, and we thank you graciously for your time and your stimulating ideas. Thank you. We thank you at home for viewers.